Don't cry. Jimin swayed from side to side, holding his daughter close to his chest. He looked over at his wife, relieved to see her sound asleep. Jimin's 9-month-old daughter, Kyla, was teething, which made her fussy and grumpy. Since Kyla had been troubling her mother all day, Jimin decided not to wake her up again. He quietly made his way towards the door. Where are you going? He stopped in his tracks upon hearing her voice. He had planned on leaving the room without waking her, but Kyla's cries had already stirred her from her slumber. He turned to her with apologetic eyes. I'm going out to calm her down. You can go back to sleep. I'll handle her. He said this more to reassure himself than her. She sat up in bed and rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the remaining remnants of sleep. She let out a deep yawn and outstretched her hands towards him, her voice hoarse and tender as she murmured, "Give her to me." Jimin handed his wailing daughter to Vaya's arms, hoping her motherly warmth would soothe her cries. As she held her little daughter in her arms, she noticed a frown forming on her forehead. She placed the back of her hand on Kyla's forehead and then her neck. The skin felt hot and clammy to the touch, and her cries sounded weak and pained. Jimin, I think she has a fever. She couldn't help but feel anxious and concerned for her daughter's well being. She gently rocked her back and forth, murmuring soothing words in her ear, hoping that it would bring some relief to the little one. Despite her efforts, her cries continued. Jimin didn't take the news well. He stood up and began searching for his car keys. When he found them, he turned to Vian. Let's go to the hospital right now. His gaze reflected regret. If only he had realized sooner that his daughter was sick, he would have taken to the doctor immediately. Wine promptly got off the bed and trailed him outside. Jimin glanced over at his daughter, who was sleeping peacefully with her bunny plushie tightly held in her arms. The previous night had been quite chaotic, as they had to rush to the hospital only to find out that she had a mild fever. Although she calmed down after the doctor administered medication, both Jimin and Ryan were unable to sleep throughout the night. They both stayed awake, gazing at their little bundle of joy, who was finally enjoying her much needed rest. My cute little princess, he whispered and planted a soft kiss on her head before taking a seat on the bed. As he sat with his back facing her, he pulled out his phone to check his schedule and a few emails. He was so absorbed in his work that he failed to notice Kyla's longing gaze from behind him. She was awake and in desperate need of her father's attention. She whimpered and thrashed her limbs to gain her father's attention, but it seemed he was too much occupied in his work. Unable to bear the ignorance for long, she skillfully turned on her stomach and crawled towards him. Clutching his shirt in her tiny palms, she slowly rose to her wobbly feet. Jimin craned his neck towards her, a smile curving on his lips. After several failed attempts, she finally got his attention. Her lips stretched in an adorable grin, flaunting her lower incisors. "Oh, you woke up?" He smiled and pulled her in his arms. Her sweet giggles filled the air as Jimin pressed kisses on her chubby cheeks. "You scared us last night," he mumbled and held her tiny body close to his chest. She rubbed her face against his warmth like an adorable puppy. It was her favorite activity, getting pampered by her parents, especially her father. Jimin pivoted his focus back on his mobile screen. Meanwhile, Kyla's little fingers toyed with his shirt buttons, her cheeks pressed against his pillow-like chest. Jimin, her steps halted, and words disappeared in the air as she watched the sight unfolding before her eyes. A smile made its way to her lips before she could notice it. She quietly stepped towards them and snaked her arms around Jamin's neck. He smiled and put his phone aside, giving his undivided attention to his little family. One placed the back of her hand on Kyla's forehead, followed by her neck. Her temperature is normal now, she sighed in relief, pinching her daughter's cheeks, who was looking at her with her stone melting eyes. Yeah, she's not crying. That's the biggest relief for me. Vine nodded and dropped a kiss on Kyla's head, who gave an adorable smile in return. Pressing a loud kiss on Gemma's cheek, she straightened up. Breakfast is ready. Come out and bring your hyperactive princess too. Only you can feed her to her heart's content. Jimmy nodded and rose from the bed. Kyla remained nestled in his embrace. As he took a step forward, Kyla let out a shrill cry. His face contorted with concern. What happened, princess? He blinked in disbelief when she stopped crying and grinned at him. Oh, you are playing with me? He squinted his eyes at her, prompting sweet giggles from her. He shook his head and stepped towards the door. This time, he ignored her cries, thinking she was being mischievous. Not until she sobbed loudly. He looked down and got worried, seeing thick tears rolling down her cheeks. Kyla, what's wrong? His concerned eyes met Vian's, who was equally worried and confused as him. Kyla, come here. She tried to take her from Jimin, but she wriggled, refusing to leave him. His shirt was tightly clutched in her tiny eagle like claws. She cried more loudly when Vian used force. Sighing, Vian left her and she retreated into Jimin's embrace. Don't cry, princess, he muttered in an undertone. Her cries pricked his heart most painfully. He could withstand anything but her cries. This was his weak point. Jimin, I think she doesn't want you to leave, she mused, noticing the way Kyla clung to him as though her life depended on it. Considering the way she reacted earlier, affirmed her assumptions. You don't want me to leave? He looked down at Kyla, who was sniffing. Her lips puckered in a pout as she glanced at him through her glossy eyes. Okay, I'm not leaving. He sat back on the bed, adjusting her on his lap, reached out for his phone and typed a quick text to his secretary before tossing it aside and pivoting his full attention on his grumpy daughter. What do you want to do? Do you want to play? He asked, wiping her tears with his thumb pad. She pointed at the story book placed at the nightstand. You want me to read you a story? She bobbed her head. He chuckled and grabbed the storybook. He proceeded to read a story of her liking while Vine collected her toys, dumping them in the toy basket. The breakfast was long forgotten as both Vine and Jimin indulged themselves in entertaining their little one. She was more than happy, thoroughly enjoying the attention and affection her parents showered upon her. Lunchtime. Vine smiled hearing Jimin's voice from the living room, followed by Kyla's giggle. Soon after, they appeared in the kitchen. Vine chuckled looking at their position. Kyla was sitting on his shoulders, holding his hair for support. She was sitting there like a princess sitting on a throne. Indeed, she was her father's princess. He grabbed her tiny body and, with one swift move, put her down on the floor. You sit here till I help your mother. He stepped forward and helped Vine in arranging the table. As he moved to and fro between the dining table and kitchen counter, Kyla trailed behind him. She called wherever he moved, being an unconditional devotee of her father. The little family lazed around in the living room after having their lunch. Vine was sprawled on the couch looking at the father daughter duo being energetic more than ever. She wondered how they were so charged when all she wanted to do was to sleep soundly, without any disturbance. Kyla crawled across the living room, stopping momentarily to look back at Jemin, who was crawling behind her. She would let out a squeal every time she looked back and found him just behind her. Jemin smiled as a mischievous idea popped into his head. When Kyla moved forward, he quietly got up and hid behind the couch. Vine's lips stretched in a lazy smile. She reached out for her phone, ready to record the adorable memory awaited ahead. This time, when Kyla looked back, her smile dropped instantly when she didn't find Jemin there. Her curious doe eyes raked around the area before it settled on her mother. Vine pointed behind the couch, holding her phone in position to record the moment. Like an overspeeding bullet train, she crawled towards the couch. Taking its support, she slowly got on her wobbly feet and rounded the couch until she reached the edge. Tilting her head, she tried to sneak a glance of her father. She flinched, startled by his sudden move. She lost her balance and fell on her butt. Vine and Jimmy shared a glance, thinking she was going to cry. But to their surprise, she burst into heaps of laughter and clapped her hands in excitement. Her laugh was contagious, instantly bringing a big smile on her parents' face. "You squishy munchkin!" He picked her up and bounced her in the air. Her laugh got louder as she realized the new fun activity with her father. Cradling her in his arms, he peppered kisses all over her face. Her laughter didn't die down even for a moment. Jemin, contented by the smile on her face, blew raspberries on her stomach. His move erupted more squeaky chortles from her. "I just love you, my sweet girl." He twirled her around in the air, stopping suddenly when his eyes fell on Ryan, who was recording everything with a smile etched across his face. "It will be better if you join us instead of recording, isn't it, Kyla?" Kyla, being an obedient daughter, nodded without understanding a single word. Ryan shook her head and put the phone aside. "I'm better here. I don't have much energy to cope with your activities. And about recording, I'm doing so to show her how her father treated her once she grew up. So, so she won't settle for less." Jimmy chuckled and nodded in agreement. Jimmy's phone went off, interrupting the moment. Seeing his secretary's name displaying on the screen, he swiped the green button and held it to his ear. "Yes." Walking towards Van, he handed Kyla to her and stepped a little away to continue the conversation in silence. As he paced around, speaking with the person, Van and Kyla's gaze moved along with him. Van's gaze held love for the last man of her life, and Kyla's innocent orbs were filled with unadulterated admiration for the first man of her life. It would not be wrong to say that both mother and daughter were whipped for the man standing before them. "No, keep them in my office. I'll go through them tomorrow. Today is solely reserved for my family." Giving a few more instructions to his secretary, he disconnected the call and looked at his little family. "What?" He raised his eyebrows, indirectly asking about the reason of their constant gaze on himself. "Nothing, just admiring our handsome man, isn't it, Kyla?" Kyla looked up at her and bobbed her head. Blood rushed to his cheeks, casting a rosy pink hue on his cheeks. That was unexpected and smooth. "Oh, Ryan," he trailed off, scraping his neck in mortification. He was a confident man and a responsible father, but he was a shy husband for her flirty wife. She didn't flirt often, but when she did, it always left him flustered. Wyan chuckled at his adorable reaction, which intensified in a hearty laugh when Kyla giggled and clapped her hands in excitement. See, even she agrees with me. Jimin pounced on them, squeezing them in his arms and tickling them in between. The house became lively with a hearty laugh and contagious smiles. Let's go out somewhere in the evening. It's been so long I didn't take you both out for an outing. Oh, long ago means last weekend. Aren't you spoiling us so much? Jimin chuckled and nodded. My girls deserve to be spoiled by me. After all, I have the right to do so. Kyla whined and buried her face in Wyan's neck. A tired yawn escaped her lips, followed by Jimin's and Wyan's mouths. The night's exhaustion was finally taking over their senses. Jimin pushed himself off the couch. Leaning down, he picked Wine in bridal style. She let out a gasp at his sudden move, her grip on Kyla tightening protectively. Jimin would time for a family nap, he uttered, thereby answering her unshared question. Wine closed her eyes and kissed Kyla's back, who was being all cranky and whiny. Jimin put her down in the middle of the bed and lay down beside her. The little one whimpered, pulling Wine shut in irritation. Wine understood the reason behind her frustration. She opened a few buttons of her shirt, letting her latch her mouth on her breast. Although Kyla had started eating solid food, she still needed breast milk at least twice a day. Wine sighed when Kyla sucked the milk like she had been hungry for ages. Jimin peeked from Wine's shoulder and scrunched his nose. Lucky, he mumbled, loud enough for Wine to hear. Wine slapped on his shoulder, narrowing her eyes at him. Meanie, only take care of Kyla and not me. He mumbled some gibberish words under his breath and nestled his face in the arch of her neck. As the serene silence settled in the air, they found solace in the castle of slumber.